Hello, friends. You've stumbled across a short clip from the Daily Switch 2 podcast, which, believe it or not, is a podcast that is about the Switch 2 with new episodes released daily. What will they think of next? Super Mario Galaxy plus Super Mario Galaxy 2, as Nintendo is awkwardly calling it. In my predictions, as I mentioned, I figured we would get some kind of Galaxy 2 reveal, and as soon as I saw the movie reveal, it was even more of a no-brainer. The reason why I predicted a Galaxy 2 reveal for the 40th was because... Hello, baby. Sorry, one of my cats is coming to assist me. This is Petit Chaton. C'est bonjour, Petit Chaton. Ouais. Bonjour de mes abonnés. Sorry, my cat is French, so I speak French with him. Ouais. Ouais. Désolé. Where was I? Yeah, the reason why I predicted a Galaxy 2 reveal for the 40th was because for the 35th, we got a Super Mario 3D All-Stars for Switch 1, which contained Mario 64, Mario Sunshine, Mario Galaxy 1, but weirdly, no Mario Galaxy 2. At the time, many people felt like it should have been included, and given how it was just a simple upscaled widescreen emulated port of Galaxy 1, there seemed no logical reason that they couldn't have included Galaxy 2 other than they wanted to save it for later. That 3D All-Stars collection was fairly controversial when it released for various reasons. Many people felt it was somewhat undercooked and should have included more content, not just Galaxy 2, but why not museum-style videos or galleries? Again, like I mentioned earlier, there is a wealth of stuff that Nintendo has access to that could really round out these kind of packages and make them feel more like a celebration. I'm thinking of the excellent work of companies like Digital Eclipse do when they put out compilations. We'll get onto that later with the Mortal Kombat collection, which I'm 100% getting and really looking forward to. Another thing that was controversial was the price. $60. Way, yes it was, wasn't it, baby? Way. Another thing that was controversial for the price, $60 for the collection felt steep when N64, GameCube or Wii games had been previously sold much cheaper on the Wii and the Wii U Virtual Consoles. While there were very minor changes and upgrades made to the three games in the All-Stars collection, they were basically just emulated and not proper remasters or remakes that would justify a larger price tag. My feelings on the price issue were mixed at the time. On the one hand, yes, compared to previous Virtual Console prices or compared to the content offered in other retro compilations or the effort made in other full-priced retro remasters, $60 felt extremely overpriced for just 3 games. But on the other hand, those 3 games were 3 of the best games ever made. No question that each one of them provides many, many hours of entertainment. I've replayed all of those games multiple times, and I'm sure most big, long-term Mario and Nintendo fans have. So it was simultaneously overpriced, undercooked, lazy collection, and great value at the same time. A weird prospect. Kind of like, well... Of course, it's a no-brainer to buy it, but at the same time, it should have been so much more, especially when charging what was, at the time, the standard price for a full, brand-new AAA release. These same criticisms apply to this new collection, but multiplied by 10, obviously, but we will get onto that in a moment. The other major criticism of that 3D All-Stars pack was that, like Mario 99, also from that 35th anniversary celebration, it was a time-limited release and is no longer available to buy. I'm far from the only person that really hated that. Obviously, die-hard fans who were around at the time just bought it while it was available, but for anyone who couldn't afford it at the time, or for newcomers buying a Switch or Switch 2 after this date, it means that the only way to get that collection is to buy it second-hand, often from scalpers. What on earth is Nintendo's motivation in doing that? They don't make any money from these aftermarket sales. If it was still available to buy, then people would still be regularly buying it when they pick up a new console for them or their kids. Mario titles are evergreen sellers. Sure, Mario 64 and Mario Sunshine are now on the Switch online services, but there are plenty of people who don't buy that because they don't want their kids going online, and also plenty of people that want to physically own these games on a cartridge to be able to always play it in the future, or to just have a nice box on the shelf, you know? Physical collections forever, not just renting things with a subscription. So I knew we'd probably be getting Mario Galaxy 1 and 2 available for the 40th anniversary. It only made sense, but I did fear that they would either be digital only, possibly linked to only Switch Online subscriptions, or if they did release it physically, they would only be available for a limited amount of time. So, while I'm not exactly happy with every detail of how Nintendo is going about this release, I am very happy to say that neither of these fears was justified. And while it's not a perfect announcement, especially as far as the price goes, it could have been so much worse. So let's get into it then. I'm sure most of you know what Galaxy 1 and 2 are, but for those that don't, a very quick summary would be that Mario Galaxy was the third major 3D Mario platformer for home consoles. The sequel following Super Mario 64 on the Nintendo 64, obviously, and Super Mario Sunshine on the GameCube. It released on the Wii in 2007, and it was one of, if not the best exclusive title on that system. Beautiful graphics, incredible music, the first Mario game to have a full symphony orchestral recording, a surprisingly fleshed out story for a Mario game with Rosalina's storybook, and a really interesting game mechanic where setting the game in space allowed for all kinds of cool playing with the physics to control Mario in ways that were never possible before, being upside down or on cylinders or on spheres, etc. It's one of the best 3D Mario games ever. Hell, it's one of the best platformers ever in any franchise and in 2D or 3D. It's just an extremely high quality product. One of Nintendo's absolute flagship best. Obviously, Super Mario Galaxy 2 was the sequel, and quite a rare thing for a 3D Mario game to get a follow-up on the same console, releasing on the Wii in 2010. Usually with 3D Mario titles, you just get one per console per generation. Perhaps an explanation for this is that Galaxy 2 was originally planned to be more of a DLC or expansion to Galaxy 1, with the original working title of Super Mario Galaxy More. But they obviously decided that eventually, as more and more was added to the expansion, it warranted being sold as a separate game and labelled as a sequel. A bit like what we talked about at length in my developer's breakdown of Hollow Knight Silksong, and what I've considered with my own games that I'm developing. When you make a game, it's natural to have feature creep, cool ideas that occur to you while developing, and things that you want to include if you have enough time. And it's always important to know what needs to be in the base release, what could potentially be saved for DLC or later expansions, whether free or paid for, and what is just too much, too elaborate, too pricey and time-consuming to develop, and what warrants being saved for a true sequel if the first game does well enough to justify such a thing. Mario Galaxy 2 is beloved by many, myself included, but what's always been controversial is which is better, Galaxy 1 or 2, and whether it should really count as a true sequel or whether it really is just more of the same. My own personal opinion is that I really love the fact that Yoshi was added, and some of the levels and challenges in Galaxy 2 are even better, more fun to play, and better designed than those in Galaxy 1. But the fact that they downplayed the story elements, didn't include Rosalina's book, and made the whole thing feel more linear and separate challenging levels using the same engine as the first game, it's less of a complete experience and does feel like, to me personally, it's more of an extension of the first rather than a game which stands alone by itself and doesn't require you to play the first game. It's just more of the same, but that doesn't mean it's not really, really good, incredibly polished and well designed. And yeah, I'm absolutely a sucker for anything Yoshi, so it did feel really weird when it wasn't included alongside Galaxy 1 in the 3D All-Stars collection. It felt very, very ominously missing, and like they were going to try and charge for it later down the line. It's worth noting that both Galaxy 1 and 2 got budget-priced Nintendo Selects re-releases on the Wii, and were available on the Wii U eShop for just $20 or £17, as I remember paying myself in the UK. So while it's unusual in the modern era, basically Switch 1 onwards, there is no reduction in prices for Mario games. If anything, they go up in price, much to my chagrin. There is precedent for Nintendo selling both Galaxy 1 and 2 at more wallet-friendly budget prices. Not to mention Galaxy 1 being already one of the 3 games in that $60 All-Stars collection on the Switch 1. So yeah, pricing. This is a weird one. During my live reaction, you may have heard that I was happy to have Galaxy 1 and 2 available and relieved that there would be a physical release. But my main concern was how they were going to be priced, and that is the main concern that people are going to have here. If it was already considered a bit rich for Nintendo to charge $60 for a bare-bones collection of 3 old 3D Mario games, then it's even worse now that they're charging $70 for just 2 old 3D Mario games, especially as one of them was already included on the previous $60 collection. If you want to, you can buy them digitally for $40 each, so it is arguable that if you already bought the last collection and you only want Galaxy 2, you can save yourself $20 in inverted commas, but as I said, most collectors will want the physical edition. It's also arguable that if both digital games cost $40, that buying a $70 physical edition saves you $10. That's kind of true, sure, but that just serves to make the $40 prices just look even more steep and ridiculous. As I said, both games have previously sold as physical editions for less than that as Nintendo Selects, and at half the price when previously being released digitally on the Wii U. And here's something that many don't seem to have noticed. This is a Switch 1 physical release. As far as we know, there is an update for it to run better on the Switch 2, yes, but there will be no Switch 2 physical edition. And while Nintendo has somewhat conditioned us to expect some Nintendo games to cost $80 nowadays, and therefore $70 seems cheap by comparison, for example, DK Bonanza seemed like a bargain after the $80 Mario Kart World, that simply isn't the case for Switch 1 games. Those prices are only for Switch 2. The standard price for first-party Switch 1 games is and always has been $60, and until now, there has only ever been one other Switch 1 game that Nintendo charged $70 for. Say it with me, Legend of Zelda Tears of the Kingdom. We've spoken about that before at length, but it was a very controversial thing at the time, and many people boycotted that game because of the fact it was so much more expensive, and they didn't want to encourage the price increase becoming the standard. And every Switch 1 game since Tears of the Kingdom has gone back down to $60 or below until now. In fact, Nintendo had an almost apologetic stance on the pricing of Tears of the Kingdom, basically saying that it was a one-off simply because of how huge the game was and how difficult and expensive it had been to develop. That excuse simply cannot be applied here. These aren't full remakes or remasters from the ground up. This should not cost $70 under any circumstances. But it does. And I will buy it. I am a part of the problem. I know this, and I am sorry. So often with this generation so far, it has felt like us diehard Nintendo fans are being taken advantage of, and Nintendo simply doesn't care that pretty much all of their customers are hurting for money right now because of the economy and world circumstances. They know how much fans want to play Galaxy 1 and 2 on their Switch, and especially Switch 2, and they know how many fans collect every single Mario release. They can charge whatever they want. I guess we should feel lucky that they didn't make it a Switch 2 exclusive game and therefore feel justified in charging $80 for it. But I don't feel lucky. I feel exploited, and I see many people online saying the same. Here's the thing though, a bit like what I said about my review of the recent $80 Kirby Switch 2 edition, is there $70 worth of value here? Yes. Obviously, these are two of the best games ever made. They are quality titles. If you've never played them before, they are 100% worth your time. And by the looks of it, these will absolutely be the best way to play both games, especially if you're playing on a Switch 2. So the people will just about tolerate this pricing. But Nintendo are pushing their luck. I honestly feel that if this was $50, they would probably sell significantly more copies and make a bigger profit. By pricing it this high, it's taking it from a no-brainer to a maybe I'll pick it up later down the line second-hand for all but the die-hardiest of diehards. It seems that Nintendo is making this mistake often with the Switch 2. It's basically a market economics thing. They would sell far more copies and have more happy and loyal customers who can also afford to buy more products if they just made everything a little bit cheaper. Sure, they would make less profit per unit, but by selling many more units, they'd make significantly more money overall, so they're shooting themselves in the foot. Their current pricing models seem completely broken, and while they can blame certain factors for the increased prices of hardware, the Switch 1 carts, and especially the digital-only copies, are not affected by this in the slightest, and there is no excuse for the current prices. If they wanted to get away with charging $70 or even $80, maybe they could have re-released the 3D All-Stars Collection, but have it be 3D All-Stars Collection Nintendo Switch 2 edition. So you'd have upgraded and better running versions of Mario 64. Please give it a widescreen version this time. Plus Mario Sunshine, plus Galaxy 1 and 2. And especially if they'd have included, 2D games as well, Mario 1 to 3, Super Mario World, Yoshi's Island. That would have been, really incredible and feel worth it for $80, especially if they had included, like I mentioned, things like the Digital Eclipse style museum stuff, scans of cool behind-the-scenes artwork and video interviews and things. All of that would have been very easy, practically free for Nintendo to include, but it would have made the package feel better value. At $70, this only feels like good value if you have literally never played these games before and never bought a copy of them before. But I imagine most people listening to this will have played these games before, will already own copies. So the question becomes, what makes these versions different to the versions that you already own and have already paid for? And that's where this becomes slightly interesting. So first up, the graphics get an upgrade in resolution, at least 1080p on the Switch 1 when playing docked, and 4K on the Switch 2. Obviously, that's 720p on Switch 1 and 1080p on Switch 2 when playing portably because of the limits of the respective screens. It looks nice, and it looks to be running just as smoothly as you'd want. The originals already ran at 60 frames per second, so there's no change there. It's worth noting that the Switch 2 performance upgrade patch is free, but this price, it darn well better be. If it wasn't, I think there would be riots in the streets if they tried to charge extra for it. Nintendo haven't specifically mentioned other graphics updates to the 3D portions of the game. I personally don't think that there are new models here, nor new textures. There's conflicting opinions on it, because in direct comparisons, you can see that the textures do look improved over the originals, even if you play via an emulator at a high resolution. And some people have said that these are new texture packs injected into the ROMs, but personally, I don't think so. I think this is some kind of internal upscaling algorithm, as I don't see any actual changes, and it's not quite as sharp as completely redrawn textures would be. Plus, if Nintendo had gone to the trouble of redrawing everything, they would absolutely mention it, considering how many minor things that they're mentioning as if they're big selling points. Certainly with the 4K Switch 2 version, they will be using some form of the console's built-in DLSS or something similar, and maybe a filter to increase the color contrast to kind of fake HDR or something like they have done with other games. Regardless, it all looks very nice. It's a definite improvement, albeit one with the minimum of effort required. Like they did with the 3D All-Stars games, they have injected new 2D graphics so that the UI elements and fonts match the higher resolution. That's a nice touch. One thing that always bothers me with emulated 3D games is where the resolution of the polygons is increased, but the 2D UI looks blocky in comparison. Probably my favorite improvement is that the pre-rendered cutscenes have clearly been re-rendered at a higher resolution and therefore look much cleaner. In the 3D All-Stars version of Galaxy 1, they were just upscaled, which gave some quality issues and artifacting, so these new versions do look much nicer. This would imply that Nintendo must still have the original files from when the game was originally developed. And adding to that theory, while the games themselves haven't been particularly noticeably improved, it's possible that these are newly recompiled source code rather than just a ROM with injected content like it was in the 3D All-Stars version, as minor additions have been made to the games. Emphasis on minor. In Galaxy 1, a new chapter has been added to Rosalina's storybook, basically an epilogue, probably leading more smoothly into joining the game into its sequel, knowing that most people will probably play them directly one after the other. More excitingly, completely brand new storybook content will be added to Galaxy 2. As I mentioned, one of my complaints about the original Galaxy 2 was they removed the storybook element. Miyamoto famously saying that story doesn't matter in a Mario game. So it made it feel more like a set of disconnected levels rather than a continuation of the story from the first game. So the two together will now feel a lot more of a cohesive package tied together by Rosalina's story, perhaps a bit like how Sonic 3 and Sonic & Knuckles were originally sold as separate cartridges and could be played as standalone, but when combined together, it makes the full cohesive experience. It remains to be seen how substantial this new storybook content is, but it really is nice that it is here, and to me it fixes my only real complaint with the original Galaxy 2, making this definitely the best way to play. For those that want it, there is now an assist mode as well. It gives you more health, lets you return to platforms that you've fallen off from, and a second player can control a star, collecting star bits and coins and attacking enemies to make player one have an easier time of it. Personally, I never used these kind of things, but as a parent, I do definitely understand that this can be really cool for those who want to play with younger kids, or for kids to play along with their younger siblings. And also, it makes the games more accessible for those with different needs, abilities, physical mobility, etc. So I will always praise these kind of additions being included, and I do try and think of adding these kind of options to my own games that I make in order to make them more accessible to others too. You can play the soundtracks in the game as well, 154 songs within the music mode, but that's kind of limited value here really, as the soundtracks have already been added to the Nintendo Music app. It says that there are more new songs from the new storybook content. I don't know if these are also going to be included in Nintendo Music, or if these will be exclusive to the new version of the game only. I'm sure that they will be added to YouTube or whatever unofficially if they never make it through official channels. So it's not as cool as museum or gallery content, but it is a nice bonus addition for free for sure. There were two specific Mario Galaxy amiibos announced for sale separately in this Direct, and we'll get to them in a minute. But if you buy the Mario and Luma amiibo, you can use it to spawn a health mushroom, while the Rosalina and Luma's amiibo gives a full 1-up mushroom. I guess that's kind of cool, but given the assist modes, I'm not sure how useful this actually is. And also the amiibos are launching significantly after the game launches, which is weird. For some reason, not mentioned anywhere in the English language website or trailers, but in the Japanese website, it does mention that on Switch 2, you can use mouse mode. Initially, that seems like a good idea because the original Wii versions of the games used the Wiimote as a pointer so that you could control a cursor separate to Mario to collect things without having to run over to them, something that was very awkwardly emulated in the previous Switch 1 only 3D All-Stars version of Galaxy 1. So at first you might assume that's what this mouse mode could be useful for, but it seems from the Japanese website at least that the mouse mode only applies to that Player 2 functionality that I just mentioned, which is very strange. Other than that, the only other info that we have is that the games will release in this October. Presumably that's for the physical Switch 1 release, the Switch 2 upgrade, and the 2 separate eShop versions, though we don't actually know yet. They may be released on different dates. Although, bizarrely, so far we've only been shown the Switch 1 footage with nothing of the Switch 2 version. We've only just been told that it will be 4K. This makes me wonder if it actually is just 1080p using DLSS to output the 4K, and they are avoiding putting up footage to fend off pixel peepers like Digital Foundry and the like. Either way, 1080p is fine for me. These were good-looking games anyway, to be honest. Right, so that is literally everything to know about Super Mario Galaxy plus Super Mario Galaxy 2 for the Switch 1 and its free Switch 2 upgrade of what we know about it so far. Basically, it's very slightly upgraded versions of 2 of the very best Mario games. Very easy to recommend if you've never bought or played them before, but a pretty scandalously large price for those of us who've already played them countless times. At a lower price, or including more games on the cart, this would have been a no-brainer. But as it stands, we have only the second games ever for the Switch 1 to be released at the absolute highest possible price point. And it's basically just upscaled versions of 2 games that have previously been sold as budget $20 releases by Nintendo. And although I didn't mention this before, I'm pretty sure I remember that when they were initially released on the Wii U, for the first week or two, they were actually on sale for just $9 each. So previously, both of these games you could have bought for $18 for both of them, and now Nintendo is charging $70 or $80 if you buy both separately digitally. It's kind of crazy. This one is for just newcomers or collectors only, frankly. But I said I'd make a tier list for all game announcements in this Direct. Were the price more reasonable, or with more games included on the cart, or a proper remake from the ground up, this would have been an easy S tier just because of how good the original base games are. And I don't want to downplay that. These are excellent, excellent games, some of my favourites. Were it digital only, or adding them to Switch Online, I would have just put them at B tier. So I think that this comfortably sits at an A tier in between the two, as long as I am allowed to complain loudly about the price every time I mention them until the end of time. A strong start to the Direct, but it could so easily have been much, much more of a convincing win had it just been priced more reasonably, or if the games had more included on the cart. Oh well. Still, 2 great games coming to Switch 1 with a free Switch 2 upgrade. Can't really complain. Well, that was funny /sad /informative /stupid, wasn't it? Feel free to mentally redact to make that make sense with the clip that you just heard. I don't know what it was. I'm just recording a bumper. But if you enjoyed the clip, please give it a like. If you'd like to hear more, click subscribe, and you can find all the ways to listen to and support the full daily podcast at linktree/dailyswitch2. That's linktr.ee/dailyswitch2. Let's go! Did I sound like I mean that? I do. I really do.